Good afternoon and welcome to another Screenside Chat with CWD. I'm Jeff Hitchcock, the president and founder of Children with Diabetes. This week's chat is sponsored by Tandem Diabetes Care and features a team from Tandem to discuss everything you wanted to know about Tandem Diabetes Care and the t:slim X2 pump, but didn't know who to ask. The discussion will be led by Tandem's Chris Angell, a person living with diabetes and a member of the commercial marketing team. In his work at Tandem, Chris focuses on designing resources to improve the experience of their customers and more effectively communicate the unique values that Tandem brings to people living with diabetes. Chris lives in San Diego with his wife and his 6-year-old twin girls. He's thrilled to be attending his 9th Friends for Life conference, Orlando and Anaheim, and conference as a host of this session. So Chris, I'm going to turn off my camera and mute myself and hand it over to you, and I'll be back at the end for some closing remarks.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Hopefully I have some slides up and you're not looking at my face too large anymore. Really appreciate that introduction. As you know, Children with Diabetes is an organization that's very dear to me, and I think you guys just do incredible work, both online and of course, with your live events. And I really consider myself lucky to have experienced as many of them as I have. I also want to introduce our senior social media support specialist, Kelsey Rivera. You can see here, she's going to be hanging out in the chat room and providing links and other supplemental materials on the topics that we cover tonight, as well as monitoring the live Q&A for any additional questions. You might find it hard to believe Kelsey and I use the same photographer for our profile shots, and well, I'm going to stop there, I think, and just move on with the rest of the talk. Before we get started, I do want to cover a little bit of housekeeping. So we frequently get a lot of questions about our innovation pipeline, future products, timelines for approval, things like that. And that is not the sort of information we can share in this sort of a format. We do give the most up-to-date information about our pipeline and future products in our quarterly earnings calls. So if those are the sorts of things you're interested in, that's a place to get the most current information. So today we will just be focusing on products that are currently commercially available. And I should also add that this is intended for a US audience. So if you are listening in from somewhere outside the US, the information shared here today may not be accurate for your location. I do also want to mention that our company takes product feedback very seriously. And so our community relations team, represented today by Kelsey, submits a monthly report to company leadership. And so any feedback that is shared during this session in the chat will be included in that report. So thanks very much, and let's get started. Just a bit about how the Q&A works. You should have little buttons for both chat and Q&A. Now the chat is somewhere that people can add comments, maybe reconnect with friends or meet new people or share thoughts. And that is not where the questions that we'll be addressing should go. There's a little Q&A button next to it, and that's where we'll be looking for questions for our panelists to respond to. So just an important difference there. And as I said, chat is also where, if we're covering a certain topic, Kelsey may add a link to a support resource or additional information that we wouldn't be able to provide by saying it. So with that, let's take a look at our panel. So we're going to start out with Kevin Neff. He's calling in from the state of North Carolina, and he's the area sales director for the eastern half of the country for Tandem. And he's attended every Friends for Life since 2015, with a couple of focus on technology events and Falls Church thrown in there for good measure. So he's definitely a veteran. Now, recently from the great state of Maine, but now logging in from Tandem's hometown of San Diego. Sorry. Erica Page is our sales and clinical training manager, who, as I mentioned, is very enthusiastic about her first CWD event. And last, of course, not least, Blair Ryan, our senior manager of community relations, has been to every Friends for Life since 2011 in Orlando, as well as the 2015 Anaheim event as well. So a real veteran. So that's the Tandem team who will be answering your questions today. We tallied it up, and together between us, we have 103 years of combined type 1 experience under our belts. So hopefully a little bit of that will show through. And with that, I think enough about us. Let's get on to the questions. So this one is going to be handled by Blair. How is Tandem affected by COVID-19, and sort of how's the business adapting to this new situation?
Yeah, for sure, definitely top of mind. Thank you for the question. We're relieved to let you know that we like to say it's business as usual at Tandem. Of course, everything is normal, nothing is normal, and nothing feels usual. But our teams really haven't missed a beat. From day one, our manufacturing teams are continuing to go in. Of course, accommodations were made to separate people on the assembly room floors and to make sure shifts were contained and again in smaller groups. But they're our COVID heroes right now, really going in every day to continue getting infusion sets or cartridges, infusion sets, and pumps out the door to our customers worldwide. As for the rest of us, all of our departments outside of manufacturing have been working from home. And we were able to do that because our IT team was really agile and flexible, and they had outfitted Kevin's team to be successful in the field. They work remotely, they work from many different venues, and because our IT teams had that practice, they were able to quickly outfit the rest of us to work from home in a safe environment and efficiently. So again, while nothing feels normal or usual, it is business as usual at Tandem, and you'll hear a bit more about our training, and our clinical teams have been set up to be super successful in onboarding new patients, even if they're coming from pump therapy or first-time pumpers. We've had success training them remotely. So we're quite optimistic and grateful for the teams here at Tandem getting the rest of us set up to work from home.
Yeah, thanks, Blair. Now sort of a 180 question here. I love my pump, but I don't like the clip. Any plans to expand accessories? You hear this one in person often at Friends for Life events also, don't we?
So often, and our accessories page is very highly trafficked on our website, and this is definitely an incoming question, daily from our social followers. So we know this is top of mind for everyone. We know that wearability, can hinder or help somebody being able to make the most of our technology, and it's very important, and there's not one size fits all. So most recently, we're excited to announce a new partnership with Sugar Medical, which they will offer on our behalf another option for encasing your pump, a protective gel case. And this is, the first of what we hope to be other partnerships to increase our accessibility accessory suite. And I was doing some walkability tests with my colleagues here at Tandem, and what we learned, we were in debriefs about what we had experienced when using each piece. Everybody had different preferences. Everybody liked the feel of different things and liked the orientation of different things. So it made us realize there's not one size fits all, and we're doing our best to now offer a bigger suite, and likely through additional partners. But be sure to check out the new offering from Sugar Medical. It's a gel sleeve, and you can find it both on our accessories from our partners page and in our Amazon shop store.
Thank you. All right, Kevin, first one for you. Big one now. What are the differences between basal IQ technology and control IQ technology?
That's a good one. It's one that we hear quite often, and I'll answer it pretty, I guess very high level, and I'll let Erica get in some of the details about how they work. But I usually start this answer by saying what the two things have in common: the basal IQ and control IQ. They both use the t:slim X2 insulin pump. Obviously, that's the hardware. They also use the Dexcom G6 CGM, or continuous glucose monitor. So those two are the hardware parts, and then they are both also predictive algorithms, meaning that they look ahead, and they use the data that they're receiving from the Dexcom G6 every 5 minutes to make a predictive, to predict what's going to happen with your blood sugars going forward, and then make appropriate changes to your insulin delivery. And I think the last thing that they have in common is is that they're very easy to use. They're meant to work in the background without the user having to interfere with the use of them, or intervene to help them along. They just work in the background, so they're very easy to use for the user. So those are the similarities, and I'll just touch on how they're different. Basal IQ was our first automated insulin delivery algorithm, and we developed that and launched it in 2018. And it uses those CGM readings that come in every 5 minutes from the Dexcom to look forward 30 minutes and say, hey, if the blood sugar is going to be low, it's almost like a light switch. The way that we refer to this is sort of like the on-off switch. So if it looks ahead and predicts the blood sugar is going to be below 80, it just turns the basal off. So on and off. You see if you're seeing the screen right now, you'll see on the bottom there where it says, where you see the basal IQ, this home screen there, those red bars that you see that are vertical up and down, that indicates where the basal has been turned off on the basal IQ pump there at the bottom. And you can see the insulin has been turned off there with the S at the top, and there's a little red diamond on the top left side that also indicates that the basal has been turned off. So it will do that every 5 minutes. And it takes that reading and makes a calculation every 5 minutes, and it can turn it on or off based on where the blood sugar is predicted to be. So very simple algorithm, works in the background, and we called that the game changer. When that came out, it was really a game changer for people, helping to prevent low blood sugars throughout the day, and then at night to help prevent those low blood sugars from happening. And the next one is Control IQ, and that came out. We launched it in January of this year, and that one it's a much more sophisticated algorithm, but it helps predict and prevent highs and lows, and it's designed to keep the blood sugar between 70 and 180, or to keep the blood sugar in range, in a safe range. So I guess the way to think about that one, if you take the switch analogy one step forward, instead of just an on-off switch, this one is like a dimmer switch. So it will if it predicts a low blood sugar coming, it will turn down that basal rate, and even turn it off if needed. And then and the converse, when it's seeing the blood sugar is going to be higher and starting to go out of range, it will turn up the basal rate, and it can even give a correction bolus. That's why it's called the first of its kind advanced hybrid closed loop insulin pump system. So those are both available through software updates. So many people, I think everyone on the panel certainly has seen how both of those work and how they've changed their lives. We call Control IQ really a life-changing technology, because it really has proven to be that way for many, many people who have tried it and started it. It's probably as in-depth as I want to go. And I know that the next, I think Erica's got some more detail about how they work, how the math works and all that stuff. So hopefully that gets to the
very
moment.
prescient of you, Kevin. Yes, it turns out that in fact our next question is, how does Control IQ technology work? I think you gave a nice intro, and then there's sort of a follow-up here. What do I need to consider adjusting to make it work best for me? I think a lot of people have questions about the settings they have now, if those if those need to be changed to use with Control IQ. So
Sure.
Erica, why don't you take it away, and I'll put up we call our flag slide that kind of gives a
Perfect
visual aid to what I expect you will be talking about.
Yeah, so I won't be talking about the mathematics of it, because that is like differential equation calculus beyond my brain. I can certainly talk about the treatment parameters of things. And just to recap what Kevin was saying, Control IQ technology, it's an advanced hybrid closed loop system. So the ultimate goal is to keep your glucose values within target range, 70 to 180, by using those predictive treatment targets that I'll get into to adjust your basal and your background insulin. The system is initially programmed with your current insulin pump settings and will adjust from there based on predictive glucose values 30 minutes into the future. It also has the ability to administer automatic correction boluses. And like Kevin mentioned earlier, we often liken it to a dimmer switch if you're using that light switch analogy. Now here's where I'll get into how and when the system decides to make changes. Control IQ is communicating with the Dexcom G6 system to make glucose predictions 30 minutes out. If your glucose value is predicted to stay between 112.5 and 160, as you can see on that flag there on the screen, it's going to run on your programmed basal rates that you have in your personal profile. However, if the system predicts that you will start to run below 112.5 in the next half an hour, so say you have unexpected increase in activity for whatever reason, maybe it's a busier day at work or at school, it's going to begin to decelerate that basal, essentially starting to pump the brakes. However, if your glucose continues to fall, say for example, you're even more active than planned, and you're predicted to be below 70 within the next 30 minutes, Control-IQ will turn the basal to 0 until that's no longer predicted. It's all based on these predictive glucose values. And I would like to add that you can still bolus during this scenario. On the high end, if we talk about the upper end here, the system's going to predict that, or when it predicts that you'll start to rise above 160 within the next half an hour, it's going to begin accelerating that basal. So it's starting to ramp up what your programmed rate is a little bit higher to try to curtail that rise. It's going to gently increase to try to stave off those higher glucose values. However, say you're experiencing something stressful and your glucose continues to rise and it's been over 1 hour from your last bolus and your glucose value is predicted to be over 180 in the next 30 minutes, the system will administer an automatic correction bolus to try to get that glucose back within target range a bit faster. It's essentially giving a stronger nudge to try and get the glucose back down to target. And we also have some activity setting options to further tailor insulin needs to different physiologic states. I'll avoid going through the flags of that and those treatment parameters, but there is an exercise activity which essentially brings those treatment target or treatment targets or the goals there where it decides to make changes a little bit on the higher end, because we know that with exercise we tend to be more insulin sensitive, and sleep activity will allow us to tighten up that range because we tend to have less variability in the overnight period of time, so we can aim for tighter glucose values overnight. So the treatment values are slightly different depending on what activity you're currently running. Now, to get to the actual question, what do I need to consider? We do have real world and clinical research data that shows our system works really well for many people. And what's nice is that we see the impact immediately and that impact is sustained. But I would recommend speaking with your healthcare provider to ensure settings are optimized in preparation for the transition to Control-IQ, since the system is utilizing your pump settings to determine treatment decisions. So if it's been a while since you've evaluated your baseline settings, that would certainly be helpful. I think that's particularly important for anyone transitioning from another AID system, since every algorithm is a bit different.
Great. Yeah. Well, let's move on. I think your volume cut out a little bit at the end, so just for people who didn't hear the last point Erica was making is that if you're transitioning from a different automated system of any kind, that it's especially important to double check your pump settings, your sort of baseline settings, because there are some systems that kind of require tweaks from maybe standard pump settings to work optimally, and Control-IQ is really designed to work with kind of the same. If you have great settings that work on a normal sensor augmented pump without any automation, then those settings would be the best settings to use in Control-IQ as well. All right. See, I knew it. Back to you, Erica. Is it possible to adjust the sound of alarms and alerts?
Yes, absolutely. So the pump sound volume is set to high for everything when you open it up out of the box and charge it. But alerts, alarms, reminders, keypad taps, bolus, quick bolus, and tubing fill sounds, I think I got them all, can be personalized. So if you go into options, or options for volume include high, medium, low, and vibrate. And you can find that under pump volume, which is located under pump settings on your device. And as a safety, if your alerts and alarms are set to vibrate and they aren't acknowledged by the person wearing the device, they will be escalated until they are acknowledged, which is kind of a nice safety.
Very good. And continuing down that vein, which Control-IQ alarms and alerts are customizable?
We get this question a lot, and I think it's a really important question to address, because alarm fatigue in diabetes, and especially with the advancement of technology, is a real concern. I think it's important to distinguish between the terms alerts and alarms with Tandem products. So I'm going to kind of start there first, and bear with me, and then I'll get into the details of the Control-IQ alerts that we've added from a safety perspective. Alerts and alarms at Tandem are two different things. Alerts are things like a low insulin alert. You're starting to run low on insulin in the pump, but you probably have a few hours before you need to change out the cartridge. And the system is essentially saying, hey, I just want to let you know you might want to consider changing out your cartridge soon. It's more like a tap on the shoulder to alert you to something that you might want to consider taking action on eventually. Alarms are going to be more urgent. The system's essentially saying, hey, something's going on here and I need you to take action now or else we could be in trouble. So with that said, alarms that are programmed in the Tandem pump have not changed. Those are still as they have been, but we did add some Control-IQ alerts from a safety perspective. And these alerts are not customizable as they're essentially safety checks to bring your attention to the system. And again, I like to think of these alerts like a tap on the shoulder where it's saying, hey, take a look at this. I'm doing the best I can with my predictions and my algorithm, but I'm predicting that you may need to help me take action. I will go into the four kind of the big alerts that have been added with Control-IQ. It is important to distinguish that they are different than the CGM alerts that you program into the device. So with your Dexcom G6, you've got CGM alerts for highs and lows, out of range and rise and fall rates if you choose to set those, and those are customizable to your preference. And then we have additional Control-IQ alerts that are ingrained into the software. So you've got a Control-IQ low alert. Your glucose value is predicted to be less than 70 within the next 30 minutes or less than 80 if you're using that exercise activity. So essentially the system has done what it can, but it's still predicting that you're going to drop low. So again, it's that tap on the shoulder saying, hey, you might want to take action and possibly eat something or keep an eye out on things because I'm sensing you're going to get below that mark there. There's a Control-IQ high alert, which on the other end of things, if your glucose is 200 milligrams per deciliter or above and predicted to remain above 200 for the next 30 minutes, that will trigger the high alert. And with this one, you'll really want to troubleshoot what could be causing this high. And you can absolutely go into the bolus screen to administer a correction manually if you needed to. So basically, it's ramped up everything. It possibly has given an automatic correction, but it's saying, hey, I might need some more support here. There's also, I'm just trying to, I've done low, high. There's the max insulin alert. And this is a very rare alert. I honestly haven't seen this yet in practice, but it exists for a reason from a safety perspective. It's the system saying that you've received half of your total daily insulin amount in the past 2 hours. That's a lot of insulin in that 2-hour period of time. So let's say someone's total daily insulin dose is 50 units. And within the past 2 hours, they've received 25 units of insulin. Something's likely off. You may want to troubleshoot what could be causing this, or consider increasing that total daily insulin amount that's inputted into the device. You might be using more for whatever reason. And there is one more. There's an out of range alert for Control-IQ specifically. So what I love about Control-IQ is the system is going to continue to make predictions and administer automatic correction boluses. Unless it's lost 20 minutes of Dexcom G6 sensor data. If that happens, it's going to default back to your personal profile settings that are programmed into the pump. But the moment it regains connection with the Dexcom G6, it will continue to make its predictive automations with Control-IQ. So what we hear a lot from people is that Control-IQ is allowing them to reduce what I call the thought bubble burden of diabetes. So by trusting the system and allowing it to help make insulin adjustments, there's less interaction and thought around the systems we're wearing. So these alerts have really been established to bring your attention back to the system and make considerations in your therapy by tapping you on the shoulder when something might need to be investigated. Very long-winded answer, but I really need to get into the details of some of that there.
No, I think that's helpful because I think a lot of times those words get used interchangeably or it's not clear what the difference is. So yeah, thank you. All right, and now moving on to Erica again. What do you know? So
they're really good questions.
They are, yeah. So you're lucky, really. Before I considered 2 hours to be my active insulin time, and now Control-IQ uses a 5-hour active insulin time or insulin duration. How do you recommend I account for this? I'm worried about high PGs.
Awesome. Yeah, and this is a really great question. I'm glad someone's asking this. Again, it's going to be a long-winded response, so I apologize. But once Control-IQ technology is turned on, and it's something I didn't mention about how the algorithm works, the insulin duration is automatically set to a fixed 5 hours. So before you turn Control-IQ on, if you say have an insulin duration set to 3 hours or 4 hours, that will be inputted in there. But once you turn on Control-IQ on the pump, it changes that to 5 hours. And that cannot be changed because it's how the algorithm is basing a lot of its treatment decisions. As many of you guys probably know, rapid acting insulin starts working in about 15 minutes, and then the insulin's going to be peaking in about an hour. But there's a tail that can last much longer. And with that said, traditional insulin pump therapy, these insulin duration times often get changed and adjusted over time to make our settings work better for our glucose values. We start adjusting ratios and basals around that, say, 2-hour bucket so that it works best for us. So if your settings in your pump have been adjusted around a 2-hour insulin duration, you'll likely want to work with your healthcare provider when transitioning to Control-IQ to potentially make adjustments to your settings. Because typically what I'll see is that people with a shorter insulin duration of, say, 2 hours in their pump, they might have a weaker correction factor because that insulin curve timeline is much shorter, so they're getting more insulin more frequently. There are a couple of things we need to consider when discussing insulin duration in relation to Control-IQ. The first and foremost is that our insulin on board calculation is not linear. I don't know if you guys have heard that term before, but what that means is it's not assuming that a 5-unit bolus will take 5 hours to run its course through or on your glucose evenly. We know that that insulin curve is more physiologic, with the majority of the insulin being most effective or peaking at that 1 to 2 hour mark. But there's still a tail there that can impact glucose values later and potentially lead to stacking of insulin and low glucose if we're not careful. So we want to be really mindful of that setting with these algorithms. And traditional insulin pumps calculate insulin on board based on bolus insulin only. It's not having to take into account basal insulin on board, since this is a static dose and it's not changing. But when we start talking about AID systems or automated insulin delivery, we also now need to incorporate an insulin onboard curve with our basal adjustments. So if the basal rate has been ramped up due to higher glucose predictions, one may very well need less bolus insulin for a subsequent correction to prevent something called insulin stacking. So for this reason, along with a lot of clinical research hours, this is why our insulin duration is fixed at 5 hours, as it was deemed safe and effective in preventing insulin stacking while also keeping glucose values within that target range as much as possible with our algorithm specifically. So again, if you have a shorter insulin duration set in your pump, you'll likely need to make some adjustments to some of your settings with your healthcare provider, since your pump settings were designed in some ways around a shorter insulin curve, or you may have to rearrange those buckets, so to speak. I hope my bucket analogy makes sense, but.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I think this is, for a lot of people, right, is part of getting used to a new system like Control-IQ is sort of taking a bit of a leap in terms of letting go of some things that have worked for them in the past, when they were making all of those decisions. And I think that's a really good explanation. Kevin, wake up. Got one for you.
Thankfully, I have another question.
All right. Is it possible to start a new diabetes device while maintaining social distance?
The answer to that is thankfully yes. We've all endured the work from home environment and dealing with COVID, et cetera. And we've been really fortunate to have our field-based folks have been able to still speak with healthcare providers and patients remotely, just like we are today on Zoom or Teams. And we are able to start folks on a new device remotely. We've been very successful at doing it. And since our pump is software-based, there's many ways to show that to someone on the screen. And we have an app called T-Simulator that they can, that someone can download to their, an app for their phone, and they can look at and almost play with the actual software before they even get it. So yes, we have been very successful at making the transition and doing insulin pump starts, moving people from one pump to another, or from MDI to the T-Slim pump during this time of social distancing. So thankfully, that's affirmative. Great.
And lest she get too comfortable, Erica, if someone were to start a new diabetes device, how does training work? Can you do that without you showing up at their house? Or?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have ramped up our remote training. We've done remote training for a while. Prior to COVID, we were really kind of it's been a really nice feature that our clinical specialists can offer to certain patients. But the social distancing, it's meant that we have not been able to train our new customers in person as we usually do, right? So with several systems in place to help make it possible, our clinical training teams are really able to quickly pivot to provide remote trainings at the start of the pandemic. In the past 2 months, we've conducted, I think, like thousands, I don't know the exact stats, but thousands of remote trainings comparatively to, I think in 2019, last year, we did about 1,500 remote trainings, give or take. And in the past 2 months, it's in the thousands. So we've really ramped up and provided that opportunity to patients. And we've always been good at training, but it turns out we're exceptional at remote training. I'm really proud of the statistics that we've seen coming from polls from our customers. So we had a customer satisfaction score around remote training and noted that it was the highest in the industry. So people were 98% satisfied with their remote training experience thus far. And we're super, super, super proud of that. So a huge shout out to all those involved in these trainings and the infrastructure that makes it possible. It's been really phenomenal. So to reiterate the answer to the question, yes, remote training is definitely an option. There's certainly criteria that will need to be in place to ensure that remote training is safe and appropriate for you through talks with your healthcare provider and the local clinical trainer at Tandem. But yes, we are actively providing remote training to many of our customers.
Great. Yeah, and that's a good point at the end, that ultimately that decision is in a large part your healthcare providers, right? If they say, I don't want you to be trained remotely, there's not really, we can't override that, but we are willing to work with whatever is their preference or whatever they're comfortable with. And as you say, done that successfully quite a bit this year.
And we do have a lot of training tools and resources on our website as well. If you're excited and you're waiting for your training to come, whether it's in person or remote, check out some of those resources on our webpage. And I'm sure Kelsey can put that in the link in the chat. But some great videos and tutorials on our device and our system.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Thank you. Blair, all right, you knew it was coming, right? So here's someone who likes the environmental benefits of a rechargeable battery, which for people who don't know, the T-Slim X2 has a rechargeable battery, uses a standard micro USB port to charge. This person likes to go camping. So, all right, they're not next to an outlet. What can they do?
All right, I also like to go camping and backpacking and being away from plugs. So yeah, we're super proud of our rechargeable battery. Every Earth Day, we tally up our estimated batteries saved. And this past year, it was over 6.3 million batteries saved by individuals choosing to use a tandem pump. So super cool. But yes, an extra thing to plan for. We recommend that you use for reliability the cable that comes with your pump for charging. But there are lots of options for remote charging. There are battery packs, solar chargers, and other carryables that aren't too heavy and can be convenient to carry with you on a trip like that. Our battery is expected to last 5 to 7 days without CGM integration and 5 days with. Of course, it varies and depends on how often you're looking at your screen and powering the pump on to make any adjustments. But if you carry additional hours of battery, there are several ways to do it. So one other thing I like to do is charge in the car on the way to the trailhead using a car charger, just topping it off to make the most of those 5 to 7 days, and then carrying my additional battery pack with me. So we do have a couple blogs on, one on options specifically and one on how our customers are choosing when and how they're choosing to charge their pump. And so I think Kelsey has those on her fingertips, and we'll put those in the chat too. But yeah. Portable charging packs have been a solution for me.
Yeah, all good. And yeah, I mean, I think if you're able to keep your phone charged, then you'll definitely be able to keep your pump charged, because the battery and the pump lasts, you know, as Blair mentioned, in most cases, probably 4 to 5 times as long as most of our phones are lasting these days. So
that's a good long camping trip.
It is,
yeah.
And solar chargers work pretty well too. I don't know if anybody's used those.
They get better and better, right? Yeah. All right. Oh, Blair, another one for you. So here's someone who has the T-Slim X2 pump, and in the beginning, they weren't really in a hurry to get the Control-IQ update, but now they really want it. So what do they do?
Yeah, of
Good
course.
question.
There are, first of all, there's not an immediate rush. The update will be available to you at the time you wish to download it for free. It's free, the freeness of it is based on that it was released and approved by the FDA last year. So the first step is to go to our portal, tandemdiabetes.com, and we're increasing the functionality of this portal, and that's where you would start. So you'd request the software update there, and what would happen now is Tandem then would communicate with your healthcare provider to get the prescription. And they would receive that either by fax or by email, depending on preferences set in your portal. And once we review that, review the process, you'll be assigned training, which you get a notification for in your portal and also via email. And then once you follow your training, once your training is complete, we'll follow up with you with that code that everyone mentions that you would use with this Tandem device updater to actually put the software update on your pump from your home computer. So starting with the portal is the best place to initiate that process.
There you go. All right. Someone a little earlier in the process here wants to know, Kevin, do we offer pump trials?
This is a great question, and one that it's sort of, this is the only bummer of having a virtual Children with Diabetes or Friends for Life conference this year. We do offer pump trials every year at Children with Diabetes and Pump for the t:slim X2 insulin pump, which is fantastic. They do require a prescription or authorization from your physician. So we have the people who want to do the trial, they come in and they, we set them up on the pump and let them wear it for a day running saline, but it requires a prescription from your doctor. So unfortunately this year we don't have the ability to do that. What I'll tell you is, I mentioned it earlier, but there's a trial available anytime. There's a T-Simulator app that's available in the App Store, for Apple App Store, or the Google Play Store. You can download that T-Simulator app, and it is just like having the pump or using the pump like you would every day. You can use basal IQ, you can use the regular pump, you can use Control IQ, and it simulates actually what the pump is, what the software is, and you see people doing it. If they'll give a bolus during a meal, they can go to their pump, push 1, 2, 3 and give a bolus, push the bolus button, and then give a bolus with that on the T simulator. So that's available anytime. You don't need a prescription. You can just do it, and hopefully that gives you enough of a feel for what the pump is and how it works, the software, that you'll be confident enough to go ahead and ask your provider, your healthcare provider, about it. And some healthcare providers do have the ability to start, especially kids, on saline. But most of the time, if you do the T-Simulator app and you like it, I think your providers will be very happy to have you try it out.
Great. Yep. Yeah, that app is great, and that's an important point. It doesn't require insurance, paperwork, money, and it's just, you just download it from the App Store. So we don't even know if you download it. Like, no rep is going to start calling you. Like, you're not going to start getting stuff in the mail. Like, it's a totally anonymous process, and anybody can do it. You don't have to have diabetes. It's like any other free app in the App Store. So it's completely a no pressure situation. Play with it as long as you want, and no one has to know. Another one, Kevin, patient assistance programs to make the system more affordable. Definitely a popular topic these days as well.
Yeah, this is a popular topic. It's been on a lot of people's minds here lately, given the situation that we're in with COVID, et cetera. And so one of the things I'm most proud of Tandem for is the way that we deal with individuals as individuals. Everyone has different situations, and we take those into consideration on an individual basis. No blanket sort of policy around patient assistance, but we encourage you to call and talk to us about what your situation is. The price of the products varies so much, and usually, what we can do with any specific customer is really different. We either can do it, directly through Tandem or our network of distributors. We've seen a lot of different things go on here since COVID started with our payment plans and adjustment of payments to make sure that your therapy is accessible, given your specific situation. So I encourage you to call and ask about that if you have a question.
Great. And just for those of you out there, we are almost to the end of the prepared questions. There's a couple more. So for those of you who have submitted some, thank you. Getting to those soon. And anyone who has one, maybe on their mind, now would be a good time to get it in, because we'll definitely be switching over to those shortly. But in the meantime, Blair, someone would like to share their experience with our pump. How do they do that?
Awesome, we would love to hear it. There are several different avenues that we may then be able to share your experience with others who would find it helpful, had a similar experience, or maybe who have similar concerns. If you sent any materials, any quotes or thoughts or images to tandemcares@tandemdiabetes.com, Kelsey and I would both see that. For people who are excited to share their story publicly, it often takes longer than we'd hope to get it to the public eye, but we definitely want to hear it. Another thing, of course, we're tracking our hashtags, Tandem Diabetes, Basal IQ, and Control IQ, and T-Slim in the wild. So please use those so we don't miss it. And again, we're super grateful for anyone who's sharing. We learned so much from you. And we do have upcoming campaigns where we're interested to feature our customers and their stories. So please share, either send it directly to that email address. We will be on the receiving end, or share publicly, and we'll be excited to see it.
So we did have a number of questions submitted in advance, and actually sort of in the last, right before this started, we got a couple more. So those didn't have time to make it into the presentation. And so we're gonna sort of address those right now, and then and we'll make sure to save plenty of time for any questions that people are submitting live today. So the first one is a very technical one, but it's a very good one, and clearly a very important one, you can see. And I should give this to Erica, but based on experience, Erica's going to be getting a lot of questions, so I'm going to go ahead and answer this and take a little bit of pressure on her out of the gate, and then pile it on later on.
Thanks, Chris.
So the question is, how do I fill the small tubing of a true steel infusion set? So this is, for people who don't know, this is our steel needle infusion set, not a soft cannula set. And they go on to say, Tandem's answer, I've used the fill tubing option, has not worked for me. It makes me fill 10 units each time. The maximum fill of 1 unit set by the pump should be changed. Now, Erica, you're gonna have to correct me if I say this wrong. So sure. when you're putting on a new true steel set, you wanna make sure that you've connected the little tubing to the long tubing. So this is sort of a feature of the set, is it has a short tubing that's attached to the needle, and you have 2 contact points. And that's so that if the tubing gets pulled, it's pulling on an adhesive that's not connected to a metal needle inside your tissue. It's just pulling on that adhesive wrap. And that's sort of an additional safety measure. So when you are filling that infusion set for the first time, you want to have that short set attached to the full tubing and not insert it into your body. Before you insert the needle into your body, you want to fill the combined tubing. So the tubing attached to the pump and then the additional short length. And you fill that until you see drops come out of the steel needle. And then you can insert the needle, and then you don't do an additional fill cannula step like you would do with a soft cannula. So you fill it all at once, then insert it, and then you finish your load process. How'd I do, Erica?
I think, well, you handled that really well. And I just wanted to add, I think sometimes people may just change at the steel kind of tail of the true steel. So
sure.
What I'm wondering is if this person is asking, if I'm just changing that piece, it sounds like they're having to fill the tubing for the full 10 units. So there's a couple of things. When you go into the load sequence in our pump, you can skip over change cartridge if you're not changing the cartridge specifically. Maybe you're just changing out the site because it's irritated or something's going on there. You want to make sure that you're connecting that little steel tail to the remaining tubing there. And you can go right to fill tubing, and it's going to ask you if you're inserting a new cartridge to press new, or if you're filling an existing cartridge or filling tubing to an existing cartridge, press fill. So you want to make sure you're tapping on the left side where it says fill, and that will allow you to stop the tubing fill before the 10 units. If it's a new cartridge and you choose new, it will ask you to go through the full 10 unit prime, mostly because it takes at least that to get past that T-lock and through the tubing itself. I think that's might be what they were getting at, but hopefully that helps.
Yeah, very good point. So now there's the next one that I'm definitely not going to try to take on myself. It's a two-part question. One, does a future Control-IQ update include lowering the target blood sugar to a tighter range? And then a second part, I'll give you both at once. To that same end, is there a danger to running the sleep activity 24/7 to accomplish a tighter range in the meantime?
Good question.
That's a good
Put me on the spot. So,
it's a tough one.
well, I'm not able to speak about future product development. I can try to touch on the sleep activity part of the second part of that question. Tandem hasn't evaluated the safety or efficacy of using sleep activity 24/7. You get that question a lot. So use of the sleep activity continuously would be considered an off-label use that Tandem can't recommend. But if you wish to use this feature in that way, talk to your healthcare provider to discuss any associated risks there. And just keep in mind, there is no maximum hours duration that you can set the sleep activity, but it's intended to be used during periods of actual sleep. But that's what it's been studied for, of 5 hours duration or longer. And it's important to note also that with Control-IQ activity in sleep activity, it won't deliver automatic correction boluses. So you wouldn't be getting that component of the algorithm.
Great.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely glad I kicked that one over to you. All right, so I am now going to dig into the Q&A. Where have I put that? That's a good question. Here we go. So I see the first question to come in, and this is a good one, since Erica, you specifically said you weren't going to go into the specifics, and I think that was a terrible decision, obviously, because Angela would like to know the specific details of sleep and exercise mode. So how about it?
It was more so I didn't have to talk as much with that question, but I'm happy to answer that. So exercise, so there's two activity options you can set with Control-IQ. Exercise activity, it essentially raises the threshold for the treatment parameters. So if your glucose is predicted to be between 140 to 160, it's going to run on your program settings, right? If it's predicting that in the next 30 minutes you're going to drop below 140, it will start to decelerate the basal a little bit more quickly. And then we raise that low kind of threshold from 70 to 80. So if it's predicting that you're going to hit 80 in the next 30 minutes, it's going to kind of pump it, it's going to turn that basal to 0 until that is no longer true. So we raise it a little bit higher and a little more narrow. And on the other end of it, if you're predicted to be above 160, just like with Control-IQ without exercise activity, it's going to start ramping up that basal. And if you're predicted to be above 180 and it's been 1 hour from a prior bolus, it will administer automatic correction boluses as well. So a lot of people will ask us, do you have a temp rate? This actually kind of supersedes that temp rate feature that a lot of insulin pumps have. If you have Control-IQ off, you do have access to running a temp basal, but most people are finding that running the exercise activity supplements that insulin sensitivity that we tend to see with exercise. And keep in mind, what I love about Control-IQ is you can also program multiple different personal profiles. So say you're a super athlete like Blair, who's amazing and a really intense runner. I love it. You know, that exercise activity may not quite cut it for those long durations. So you could set a programmed personal profile, call it exercise or running or what have you, and put, you know, lower base rates and weaker correction factors in there, and then run exercise on top of that. We see people have a lot of success with that as well. The sleep activity is going to drop things a little bit lower because we have less parameters, so to speak, that are impacting our glucose physiologically overnight. So what's going to happen is you can set up to 2 different sleep profiles or sleep activities, and those will turn on once they're set in the pump automatically, right? So you don't have to go in and toggle them on. You could optionally go in and manually turn them on, but we recommend that you program them just for ease of use. And we do recommend that you're programming it for at least 5 hours. So you wouldn't be doing this for a nap, but for overnight sleeping, it's a great feature. So the ultimate goal of the sleep activity is to get your target glucose to 110 to 120 upon waking in the morning. It does a really good job of that. I've had a lot of patients come back to me and say, Erica, I've slept so well with my transition to Control-IQ. And I can vouch for that myself personally, but I think all of us can here. And what it's going to do is it's going to drop those targets lower. So the goal is to get you to 110 to 120 upon waking in the morning. And it's going to have the similar low end, so 112.5, but to 120. All right. So it's going to start ramping up that basal if it's predicting you're going to be up above 120 in the next 30 minutes.
And no automated correction.
And no automatic corrections. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Good point.
Great. And again, yeah, I mean, there are, I'm sure Kelsey's already put it in the chat, but our website, if you want to see those numbers laid out, we do have that information there. All right, next is an anonymous question, which is great. If people didn't know that you can submit questions anonymously, you can, and we're totally fine with that. Are you still on course to release Control-IQ in the UK, and can you adjust the range for the suspend thresholds? I'm gonna let Blair give a little more, I think, color to this, but for, in case it was unclear, right now all of this material relates specifically to our products in the US, but Blair, maybe you can say a little bit more.
Sure. We plan to launch Control-IQ outside the US and on a country by country basis this summer. So we don't have any timing details on any specific country, but that is the plan, and it will depend on a few, regulatory and commercial things in each country. But this summer is the plan for the rollout outside the US, which includes the UK.
All right, and I guess in terms of, Erica maybe address just the question about what sort of thresholds or ranges are adjustable at this time in our pump.
Yeah, so when it comes to basal IQ technology, that threshold is fixed. So if you're predicted to be 80, it will, like that light switch, turn off and then turn on again the moment you start to rise. With Control-IQ, that's fixed at 70 unless you have the exercise activity running. So that then automatically brings it up to 80. So 70, if you're predicted to be less than 70 in the next 30 minutes, it's going to turn that basal to 0. You can still bolus. And in the exercise activity, if you're predicted to be less than 80 in the next 30 minutes, it will turn that basal to 0. And again, you can still bolus.
Great. Thank you very much. Next from Adriana. Thank you a lot for this. I really hope for Control-IQ soon and to be able to move on to the sleek design and powerful tech. Keep up the great work. Well, that's obviously the best question of the day.
Yeah.
And we didn't vote, but thank you very much. We appreciate it. And yeah, we hope that it does everything that you want it to. Next, from Ashlyn, we have a question. My Tandem trainer told me during my training on May 1st that the T-Connect app would be released in the few weeks after that. Any update in that regard? This was one that I can take. So, we have announced that we have a mobile app in the works, and we don't have a set in stone release date, but the plans are still to release it this summer. So hopefully we'll be able to share more about that soon, but yeah, no specific dates on that, but this summer is the current plan. And let me see, another question on updates regarding pump coverage by United Healthcare. Blair, Kevin, either of you want to volunteer for this?
I can take it and just say that we can't give any update right now. We're working with all the healthcare or all the managed care organizations to make sure that our pump gets covered. United Healthcare is one of them, but stay tuned. Stay tuned. There's progress being made. I guarantee you that. So, yeah, no specific update for now, but we'll let you know as soon as something changes.
Okay, and Kevin, this would
always important.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just patient choice is always on our mind and working hard on that.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. I think this is a good one for you, Kevin. Do we have the ability to help getting T-Slim for people who are still under warranty on another brand of pump?
We do a lot of that. That's why I encourage you to call in or talk with your healthcare provider about that, about making the switch. We see a lot of that when people are in warranty with another pump and they want to switch over to Tandem. And what's really important is that your healthcare provider has, the reasons listed there in your chart notes, and I think that really does help things along. But we will definitely look at every option that we have when you call in and want to place, or make that request of us. We have a very experienced team on the inside of insurance verification specialists that will look at all the parameters, like I said, and then if need be, we'll pull all the information, pull the stuff from your healthcare provider's chart notes, and we'll do our best to help you get through that process. So, and I guess the other part of that is we do have a program right now it's actually been just extended to the end of the year. It's called the Tandem Update. You can get if you're within more than 6 months, greater than 6 months of warranty still left on your pump, there is an update possibility that it's $9.99, and it's essentially kind of it's allowing you to use the pump for that until your warranty expires for $9.99. And that if all of the other things are exhausted and we can't get you a pump when you're in warranty, that is one of the options that you have as well. So I encourage you to take advantage of that if you can.
Yes. So a lot of options. Basically, the bottom line there is every situation is different, and so you're going to get the best answer by actually speaking with someone on our inside sales team who can get more details about your specific situation and look at all the different available options. I saw this next question pop up. I thought, well, there's someone who stays very on top of diabetes news. And then I saw that it was from Stacy Sims. And so it makes a lot of sense. So Stacy would like to know what the plan is for the newly acquired Sugarmate. Will it eventually replace T-Connect, or will you be using it in some other way? So for people who maybe may not pay quite as close attention to diabetes news as Stacy does. So we did announce last week that we'd acquired an app called Sugarmate, and at this point we're keeping it as a separate product, but obviously we'll be looking over time at ways to sort of more comprehensively incorporate it into the company. But for now, T-Connect, our plans for T-Connect and our plans for the T-Connect mobile app are unaffected by the acquisition. And so, more details about, any changes or more involved integrations with Sugarmate will be things that we would talk about further down the road. To applaud this audience for being so good on time, I'm going to put up a little legalese here, and I think and pass this back over to Jeff. This was a lot of fun. I hope everybody got their questions answered, and that the additional information that Kelsey provided was helpful. Really want to thank the panel. You guys, I think, did a great job, and really thank Children with Diabetes for having us. And we hope to see everybody in person sooner than later.
Yep. Thank you very much, Chris, Blair, Kevin, and Erica. It was great. Our next Screenside Chat with CWD is scheduled for Sunday, July 12th, 3 p.m. Eastern again. We'll include myself and Laura Bilodeau for a preview of our upcoming virtual Friends for Life Orlando conference. And right now we have over 3,335 people registered from all 50 states and 29 countries. It's going to be a great virtual event. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. And if you've not signed up, visit the Children with Diabetes website to sign up for the virtual Friends for Life conference. And you can go there at cwd.is FFL, or CWD is Friends for Life. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, everybody.